what was it, June 4th? Yes, I'm so bad on dates recently. And roll call, please.
Okay. Director Boyd,
Let me see if I have to unmute now. Oh, I'm sorry. He had to rejoin. That's
Okay.
so.
Well, I see he's here.
okay.
He's on mute. So Scott, if you would, when we get back to your name, if you would answer.
I'm here.
Okay.
Okay. Director Decker. Is Peter Decker here?
Peter, you're unmuted.
Yes, I'm here.
Director Harvey,
Here.
Director Lohman. Is Director Lohman here?
I'm sure he will be joining us. I don't see his name on the list.
I don't see him either right now.
Okay. Director Slater Carter.
Present.
Director Lohman is not present at this time.
Okay. Moving right along, at the last meeting, we spent, unlike the Board of Supervisors, we actually spent quite a bit of time listening to the community concerns and trying to answer questions and make sure that the community is aware and involved in what we're doing. That's one of the advantages of small local government. We made it through the 3 public hearings. We approved the action necessary for the establishment of economic hardship assistance, and we passed the consent agenda. Essentially, we've got old business, which is 2 items. They are both budget related: review and possible action concerning approval of Sewer Authority Mid-Coast general and collections budget for fiscal year 2020-2021, and review and possible action concerning approval of MWSD water and sewer budgets and capital improvement programs. So let's start with item 1, which is the SAM budget.
Yeah, thank you, Catherine. Just real briefly as an introduction, the SAM board met on May 11 and approved the SAM general budget and SAM collections budget for this coming fiscal year. That is now to be sent to the member agencies for consideration and approval. That's what we're here for tonight. That's what we're doing right now. The overall collections budget is suggested to decrease by $144,000 or 17% over the prior fiscal year. And that is a little bit due to the city's separate collections services agreement expiring this current fiscal year, or there's some changes. The 2018-19 assessment for us for the collections contract services would actually decrease by $83,000. That's 24%. On the general budget, SAM is suggesting a decrease by $107,000. That's 1%. The total general budget would be at $7.3 million. It contains an infrastructure division budget, so something we would call a capital improvement program of just shy of $2 million, 1.975. Our assessment would increase here by $55,000 or 4% to, that's not for the entire, to $1.584 million in the coming fiscal year. Both the general and the collections budget were presented by the SAM General Manager Kishan Prativadi at the May 21st Montara Water and Sanitary District Board meeting. I also see that actually Kishan is attending tonight, and I'm certain he would be willing to answer any question if there would be any questions coming up. Our staff recommendation is to adopt a resolution that consents to the approval of the general budget and also adopt a resolution that consents to the collections budget for the next fiscal years. With that, I'm happy to hand it to the board. If there is a need to share the screen and actually look at the budget on screen, everybody has access to the packet by going online as well and getting the information on our website. So I'm going to hand it back to Catherine.
I'm sorry. You're going to hand it back to me. Thank you. And we are going to take public comment on this. So we should look for hands under the participants.
There's a comment from there. I see Sid Young has her hand up.
Are you ready for me?
Sure.
Okay, well, I didn't want to comment on this, but Catherine skipped oral comments on the agenda.
Sid,
Yes?
this is a continuation of the last meeting.
Catherine, that's a correction. We scheduled that to be a special meeting.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And that actually has public comment.
I apologize. I had not read that closely enough. Sid, let's start with public comment then.
Okay, because, sorry, now I can't see anybody. Ugh. I haven't got the hang of Zoom at all yet. Okay, basically, I went on the, this is not on your agenda, but I went on the Mid-Penn, or the Planning Commission website, and I started reading through all of their documentation before their 9 a.m. meeting today, which didn't get to Mid-Penn till around noon, I don't think. But anyway, there was a document on there that had to do with sanitary issues. So I believe I forwarded it to as many directors as I thought I had emails for. And I just wanted to ask Clemens a quick question, and that is, that particular document mentioned that they may have to have their own separate lift station for Mid-Penn project. Do you know if that's true, or if that's a possibility, and who's going to pay for it?
So it comes back to, it's going to be always the same answer, Sid. Of course, the developer has to pay for anything that is required to serve their project. Meaning if there is an additional main line, additional pump station, anything like that that is required, the developer is required to fund it. To the rest of the question, we have no information about ultimately not really enough information about the flow. We don't have an application per se, so we can't really comment on any water or sewer usage at this time.
Well, I understand. They were just mentioning that as somebody civil engineer put in a comment letter based on what Mid-Penn had submitted, which was the Stevens report. So I don't know if you saw it, but I think you should go on the Planning Commission website and read it and see if you understand it a lot better than I do, because it looked like it's going to be a lot more expensive than the Stevens report was implying. Thank you.
I've read it, and what I just said is true.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I wasn't sure. It said there was no pipes on the project. They would have to install their own sewer pipes, but it sounded like a lift station might be off campus, like down at Highway 1 or something. So I didn't know if that would be something they'd expect us to pay for. Thank you.
All right. Do we have any other folks who want to make a comment during public comment? I don't see any more hands up. So we will move back to the first item, which of old business, which is review and possible action on the SAM budget. And we are at the point where we can take public comment. So I'm looking for hands. If I don't see any, I will close the public hearing and bring it back to the board. Okay, I don't see anyone here. Any hands up? Thank you. Clemens, should we start with having Keishan talk about the budget first for the public?
Sure, if Kishan is willing to give a brief summary from the perspective of the person that actually developed the budget, that would be appreciated, I think, yes. Kishan, let me know if you want me to. First of all, you're still muted. Let me unmute you. Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm fine. Sure.
I-
Do you want me to go through a quick PowerPoint presentation again, like what I did last time, or?
Sure.
Okay, I can make a brief presentation if I could. Can I share the screen? Can you allow me to share the screen, please?
Yeah, 1 second. Take a look if it works now. Yes.
Can you see my screen, please?
Yes.
Okay. This is the same presentation which I had done on May 21st for the Montara board, but I'll just give a quick summary of it. It was assumed that all the agencies, that is Montara, Granada, and Half Moon Bay, will have a minimum of 50% of their lines cleaned on an annual basis. So the budget was actually calculated using the cost for the line cleaning and for the lift station inspection, routine maintenance, and fog inspections wherever applicable. And sewer cleaning lines, both the regular lines as well as the hotspots. And of course, the emergency response where SAM is available and they have to respond to any call within 60 minutes. And finally, the USA markings wherein it's like a dig alert where one would need to get in touch with SAM if they were planning on doing some digging at one of the areas. So it was decided after meeting with all the member agency managers that once 50% of all the systems have been cleaned, then SAM staff will coordinate with the managers to identify what more lines to be cleaned for the rest of the time in the year. Just to give you a heads up, there are 4 employees in the collection budget. You have 3 collection workers and 1 maintenance mechanic. And all these 4 employees are scheduled for step increases because they are in the PEPRA category, and they've been there for, the oldest employee in the collections is for about 6 years. Now, the model which was used was the same that was used for Half Moon Bay last year. And the cost last year was about $1.40 per linear feet. And therefore, we added a 3% COLA increase this year. And while calculating the cost for the mechanics, the collection mechanic was taken as on a fully loaded rate of about $54.78 per hour. It was assumed that lift station maintenance requires about 3/4 of an hour for inspection. And then we added about 1.25 buffer to allow for extra time in case we were required to come back. And based on our past experience, we've seen that a typical USA marking requires about half an hour, and that was what was assumed in preparing the budget. Now, the collection worker is actually a lead worker, and his fully loaded rate is 60.52. We've averaged it out and taken this as 60.52 amongst the collection workers. The lift station inspections, there are actually 13 lift stations in Montara, and presently we are doing it every day, so it's 5 times a week. And based on our past experience and after discussion with Montara manager and the engineer, we have decided to change it to 3 times a week from 5 times. So this gives you an idea about the agency fees. You see that in the case of Montara, we've been able to reduce it by about 24%, which results in about $83,000. This is just a pie chart giving Montara's share of it's about 258,000. This is breaking up the entire contract services budget into various categories. So I can possibly go to the general budget and then go for questions. Is that okay?
Please.
Okay, this is the this is the general budget. So the highlights of the budgets are that all authorized positions were included in the budget, and we have been able to defund 2 vacant positions. One is the accounting technician, and the other is the engineering and construction contracts manager. And therefore, none of the agencies are paying for it. We have totally defunded it. It was vacant, and all merit step increases have been regarded as 1 step, while vacant position, there is only 1 vacant position, and that has been budgeted at mid step. I'll come to what the vacant position is in my next slides. There has been a decrease in the health benefits of about 61,000 from the last year's budget because there was an overestimation in the budget. The retirement cost budget primarily increased by 25,000, mainly due to the 1920 budget underestimate. And 2 employees retired, and the general manager left last year. And all these 3 were classic employees as per PERS. They were replaced by non-classic or PEPRA, so that results in a small reduction in the employer percentage. You will see that in the next slides. And on an overall, we applied about 3% CPI to all non-personal costs. The infrastructure budget, which was approved by the SAM board, we had to postpone or defer a couple of projects, which was 5 projects were deferred to have a reduction in the CIP by about 660,000. We reviewed the scenario and found that these are important but not urgent, and therefore they can be deferred. And we've taken up the balance of the projects, which was approved by SAM board. So this gives you an idea about the expense by category, which is also in the board packet. I believe this is also in the board packet, and this gives you the staffing information. Presently at SAM, there are 12 employees in the general budget. There is 1 vacancy, which is the utility worker. You see that, including that, the total authorized is 12 employees. So out of the 12 employees, you have 5 employees which are scheduled for step increase, and 6 employees are currently at top step, which means they've already reached the final step, so there would not be any increases which has not been considered in the budget. And the vacant position of the utility worker has been considered as mid-step. We are yet to recruit for the utility worker. We have not advertised. We have deferred it for some time, but still we would probably do that during the next financial year, 2021, and therefore it is in the budget. So the general budget, overall, there is a decrease by about 2% in the overall budget to the tune of about 189,000. And the key changes in the operating budget, as informed earlier, there's a decrease because of a result of the defunded positions of the accounting technician and engineering and construction contracts manager. There was an increase in the legal services last year, so we have reduced it, but not considerably. We have seen that it was under budgeted last year, but we've seen a potential legal cases coming up, and therefore we have done a slight increase of about 47,000. Professional services have been increased by about 344,000 because some of the activities would need to be subcontracted. Insurance premiums have increased due to under budgeting in the previous fiscal year. Building and maintenance services have been increased. These are driven by year-to-date actuals. Equipments have decreased based on anticipated replacement needs. The current major vendors as of February 28th are Calcon, who does all the electrical work for us. We do not have an electrical operator or an electrical engineer on board, and therefore we have to rely on Calcon to do any electrical work. Then we have wastewater management specialists who was approved at the SAM board and at different levels for doing ongoing on-site improvements. And then we had Andrew Packard, attorney, the general counsel, who helped us out, who helped us with the ERF, the lawsuit that Sam handled last year. We have management partners who helped us with the accounting services, primarily for prepping for the audit, which got completed. That was a 17-18 audit. Edgecombe Law Group, general counsel, who was also involved with the ERF litigation. Evoqua Water Technologies is an equipment supplier for supplying the skimmers for the wastewater treatment plant, which was approved by SAM board. Bold Polisner Maddo Nelson is our general legal counsel. Then we had Silicon Valley Clean Water, whom we use for lab analysis. And finally, we have RF McDonald, who does the boiler maintenance for us, boiler and heat exchanger maintenance for us. So this is the CalPERS rate, which I was talking about, where you have the classic members. The employer rate is about 11.746, while the PEPRA members is about 7.874. So when I meant that the classic employees decreased, two employees retired, and one general manager left, and all three of them were replaced by PEPRA employees. So you see that the employer, SAM, has to pay, instead of 11.7%, they end up paying 7.87%. The current unfunded liability is about 198,000. These are the assessments for each agency, which is also in your board packet. And this is the decrease of 1.4% in the operating and capital costs. These are the flows. You see that Montara has had a slight increase in flows from 20.62 to 21.69 in the last financial year. The flows calculated, on the calendar year. The flows are calculated based on calendar year, so that these flows are taken in consideration for preparing the budget for the financial year. That's it, and I'm here to answer any questions.
Thank you. Let's bring it back. I see one question from Sid. I don't see any more hands. Sid? Yes, what's your question?
It is not a question, but the last time I was on a Zoom meeting and Keishan was talking, I thought because he was going over the budget, that he was the accountant for SAM. So I wanted to apologize and just say thank you for all your hard work. But I also wanted to give you a neighborhood compliment, because your SAM employees were fixing something on my street last night till almost 9 p.m. And the neighbor whose house was affected, or outside of her property, but anyway, she gave them high compliments too. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sid, and I'll pass it on to my employees too.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, seeing no comments, more questions or comments from the audience, let's bring it back to the board. Who would like to start with questions? Let's start with the Finance Committee. That would be Peter and Jim.
I have no questions.
Okay. Rick is not going to be at this meeting tonight. He has a prior important engagement. Jim?
I have no questions. Thank you.
Okay, Scott?
Scott, I've got to unmute you. Now you're ready to go, I think.
I need to switch my network. Can you give me just like half a minute and I'll be right back.
Okay, I will comment for the audience that MWSD is a very hilly system. We have numerous pump stations. We have over a dozen major pumps, or approximately a dozen major pump stations, and lots of smaller pumps that we need to take care of in Seal Cove. And we are also more prone, we have more trees in many ways than Half Moon Bay, which only has 3 pump stations. Our trees are over the lines and adjacent to the lines, and therefore their roots are more likely to go into the lines. So we need a lot more maintenance, and we need a whole lot more preventative action to keep our system from having problems. Scott, you ready?
Yeah. First off, Keishan, thank you so much for the presentation. I find this very clear, and I really appreciate the clarity in the presentation. This is something I've been looking forward to. As it's not a question, I just want to make some comments. One of the significant expenses for the agency is lawsuits, and one lawsuit in particular is brought by Half Moon Bay, one of the members of the sewer authority, and they sued Montara, and they sued Granada, and they sued SAM. And this has been extraordinarily disruptive. We were at a place where we were all together on the same page, ready to go forward with recycled water, and we found in a gridlock brought about by one member agency. I'm pleased to see that Keishan and staff and board members have worked to put together a good budget in spite of all that. But I do want for our community members who are so concerned about escalating costs, I do want to highlight that there is rather substantial cost in this budget brought specifically about because of the actions of Half Moon Bay. And I also want to point out that some of the work that we're trying to get done at SAM is being held up by Half Moon Bay. And if history repeats itself at all, then we're very likely to see some system failure, spills, fines from regulators, and further mandated projects. And I was watching I was watching the SAM meeting earlier and was mystified that Half Moon Bay would so aggressively and obviously work to disrupt the work of SAM. And I really deeply appreciate the work of SAM staff and the other member agencies, including ours, in trying to find a way forward. There has been a great deal of compromise, a lot of out-of-the-box thinking, level heads, and a determination to take care of the charge that we've been given to care for the environment and the people who live here. And all this, I mean, everyone of us on the board and staff, everyone at SAM is well aware of this, but we have a lot of people in the community paying attention now, and I really want to share some of this context. What I'm saying might sound harsh and a little hard to believe, but trust me, it's on the record. And if you want to see it in action, Monday night's SAM meeting bears very clear and obvious witness to this. So if you have friends in Half Moon Bay, you might ask them whether or not they've had a conversation with their city council members about what it is they're trying to accomplish that is causing so much consternation and difficulty for the good people working to make SAM a success. and running up the costs for everyone, including people in Half Moon Bay, because they're paying legal costs too, over things that for 40 years, all three member agencies were able to contend with and get by with. And this kind of marriage between agencies is never easy. It's always difficult. But for 40 years, we were pretty good at it. And it's only the past few years that Half Moon Bay has really been making this tough. And I really think it's time that members of the community start reaching out to their city council members and asking them some hard questions. So with that, Keishan, thank you again for the presentation. I really appreciate the information.
Thank you.
Thank you. I will go last, and I will add that we are looking in the next 20 years, hopefully it's that long, of $40 million worth of repairs that have to happen just in the sand plant in Half Moon Bay. That's going to be, we're going to have to pay for a portion of that. And Half Moon Bay is doing what it can. If you look at the flow reports, both on our agenda and at SAM, to not pay for its full burden. And in the litigation process, a lot of things are out of control of the people who have been sued. So this is something that the folks in Montara need to be aware of. We're doing what we can. The wet weather project that Scott was talking about, you can listen to the meeting and watch it on YouTube. Just put in a search for SAM, S-A-M, and then June 8th, 2020. And you will see a list. You may have to scroll down a space or two to see that meeting, and you start at about 9 minutes into the meeting. Be sure and watch items 4B and 4C. Half Moon Bay is contesting a policy and a project that they approved and have agreed to up until very recently, like several months ago. We made an agreement with the regulatory agency to do this project. Montara's ready to do it. Grenada's ready to do it. And Half Moon Bay has decided they have a better project. One that is not proven, is high cost, and is not reliable in times of emergencies, which will lead to spills. And if we were to go ahead with that one, we will be held liable for our share of the fines, even though we voted against it. Right now, we are working yet again because Half Moon Bay, although it had agreed to the project before, has decided it wants a peer review of the project. So that's going to be happening. We can spend a lot more time on this, and I won't go into the details, but do watch the SAM meeting on June 8th, 2020, start about 9 minutes in, and watch items 4B and 4C. I think you will see what Montara is working to do to keep our costs down. But given that it is the majority of the votes comes from the South, we have not the votes to carry it. If others choose to go for the more expensive, less reliable option. So I will end my comments here, and I will, if we have no more comments from the board, I will ask for a motion and a second.
I make a motion to approve the SAM budget.
Thank you, Peter.
And I second the motion.
Jim, thank you. Roll call vote, please.
Director Boyd,
Aye.
Director Decker,
Aye.
Director Harvey,
Aye.
Director Slater Carter.
Yes. Moving along to old business, review and possible action concerning approval of MWSD water and sewer budgets and capital improvement programs.
Excuse me for interrupting, Madam President. I
Oh,
believe
I
we
needed
also
to
need-
report.
we also need a vote on the SAM collections budget before you.
Oh, okay. I see. I'm using last week's agenda and it was listed together as
I know.
general and collections.
You're
Okay,
right.
so we need a motion and a second for having just unanimously approved the Mid-Coast Side, SAM, rather, general budget, unanimous, no, 4-0. We need to approve the collections budget. So I need a motion and a second.
I move to approve the collections budget as presented.
Thank you, Scott.
I second.
Second.
the motion.
Second by Jim. Roll call vote, please.
Okay. Director Boyd,
Aye.
Director Decker,
Aye.
Director Harvey.
Unmute maybe.
Director Harvey,
You
Uh,
you ready,
Director-
Jim?
Aye.
Director Slater Carter.
Aye. All right, thank you for that clarification, Christine. Let's move on to item 2, review and possible action. Now, do we need to approve the water budget and the sewer budgets and capital improvement budgets with separate votes? Or can they all be taken with one vote?
Let
So-
me, go ahead, Clemens.
With the next staff report, we're going to have a separate recommendation to adopt a resolution of MWSD approving the budget for the fiscal year 2021. So our water and sewer budgets, while we have separate accounting, are considered one budget.
Okay, and is the capital improvement programs part of that budget?
Yes,
Okay,
both
thank
capital
you very
improvement
much.
programs are part of the packet, and we're going to look at the packet together.
Okay,
So some introductory comments. We presented a draft water and sewer budget at the May 7 and the May 21 board meetings, Montara Water and Sanitary board meetings. The Finance Committee provided some input throughout the process. It also met on May 13. There was not only a review, the Finance Committee suggested some changes. At this time, the Finance Committee recommends approval of the budget. So what is in the budget is a sewer service charge increase of 9%. That was approved at the last meeting. It also contains $1 million revenue from the newly established water system reliability charge. Also built in is a 1.11% cost of living increase that is for all non-exempt employees. Then just so brief look at this, if we add all the numbers together, we have actually a total combined cash flow of $8.34 million. We have combined expenses of $9.31 million. So our expenses are roughly $1 million higher than our income. And this is now with all the increases that we included. I'm going to explain it's due to a specific project on the sewer side, actually, that we saved up for, and we're going to spend the money this year. So that means we're taking that money out of reserve. That's $973,000. The project itself is actually a little bit bigger, but that's the amount that we have to dip into reserve to balance the budget. Total infrastructure improvements that we anticipate for the next fiscal year are $3 million. That is 33% of total expenses. The Sewer Authority Mid-Coast Site assessment, that is our share of the budget that was just approved, the SAM budget. That will be almost $2 million or 21%. Our loan and other financing expenses amount to 1.597 or almost $1.6 million. That's 17% of the combined expenses. Of the overall expenses, 14% or $1.3 million are expected personnel cost. Since Catherine asked, so our recommendation is to approve the budget by resolution. We're also going to ask for the authorization of a 1.11% cost of living increase for all non-exempt employees. I would like to share the screen at this time and actually walk a little bit through the budget itself. So, one second here. Okay, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Perfect. All right. So we're going to start with the sewer side and just briefly look at some of the numbers. This is how our first pages look. This is essentially, we're looking at the cash flow for the sewer side, where we actually can see now in the first line that there is a slight increase in sewer service charges compared to the prior fiscal year. We just said it's a 9% increase in the sewer service charges. You see that that actually does not translate into a 9% increase in revenues. That's due to the flow. Sewer service charges are based on flow. And we saw a slight reduction in flow. Or can actually have also a different effect due to our minimum sewer service charge. So it doesn't have to be the overall flow, just the distribution throughout the customers. So it results in, well, an almost 8% increase in the sewer service charge revenue. We have some additional revenue that we actually talked about at the last meeting through cell towers and some other items. I want to point to the property taxes. We talked about the district actually receives a rather, the percentage of property tax income is relatively low for this agency. Unfortunately, we were always banking on what's called an education reimbursement augmentation fund, which is essentially something that is difficult to budget. We don't, certain share of our property taxes are set aside into this fund that is funding schools, and then distributed at later times. Unfortunately, there seems to be a change that affects us, and we're this year much more uncertain if we are going to see ERAF refunds, and we're also uncertain if we see the same amount of ERAF refunds going forward. So there is an element of further uncertainty that was introduced through some legislation, or that legislation is being introduced right now, and we're working with San Mateo County hoping to address this. So our operating income is roughly $3.6 million. On the operating expenses, we have actually the detailed line items in the board packet for everyone to see. So we are one of the rare agencies that actually publishes our working document of the budget. So you can look at this, and we're gonna see if our accountant, Peter Medina, is here tonight, and he may be looking at this later to answer any questions that may come up. So we have a relatively stable personnel costs. Operations costs overall are relatively stable. We definitely see a significant decrease in professional services. We're we're trying to do what we can to save costs next year. Ultimately, you see that our operations costs are significantly less than the prior fiscal year. And we see actually a net cash flow of $860,000. That money can now be utilized for anything that's below. So we can utilize that money for financing expenses, or that share can also be used for capital. So on the next slide, we have some minor investment income that's due to our sewer reserves that unfortunately we're going to draw down a little bit. So in the future, we'll see this amount to decreasing. On the capital side, we have a capital improvement program, and that is included in this budget. We have our sewer engineer here to later talk about this as well. What is actually in that CIP? I mentioned there is actually a project that is costing significant money. It's over $1 million. And we are hoping to be able to get the permit this year to implement, this is a second phase of the Cabrillo Highway Improvement Project. The first phase was implemented in the past year. We see additional income through connection fees. I think we were very, I think this is a very positive outlook. We've expected to see $200,000 in the past year. We reduced this only to $150,000. It's going to be a question if it's actually going to be that positive. We're all hoping for that construction is actually picking up later this year. Here we come to some of the financing expenses. You see on the sewer side, it is relatively minor. We have some loans on the sewer side. We're paying roughly $128,000 in total on loans on the sewer side. And you see that overall on the sewer side, we need to add $1,045,000 from reserves to be able to balance our budget this coming fiscal year. We're moving on to the water side. And so our water sales numbers, which is really the bi-monthly bills that are coming in, are decreasing. And that is due to the fact that we have not increased our water rates this year. We implemented a new charge, and I'll point out where that is listed further down. But the actual water rates have not been increased, which means that due to the ever-improving conservation, we are expecting to see a decrease in our revenue from water sales. This is always interesting. We're actually very good at estimating the water sales number, but there is quite a bit that goes into it. This year, we are expecting folks to conserve a little more water. This winter was extremely dry, and we anticipate that by fall, the statewide reservoirs will have been drawn down, and the California-wide, there will be a messaging to conserve water. We see similar other revenues on the water side through cell tower lease and property tax income. We also actually, I want to point to the $18,000 in backflow testing and other. This is ultimately a little side business that we started some years ago. Instead of paying someone to maintain our backflow and testing program, we do the work ourselves, and we see a little bit revenue coming in through that. On the personnel, personnel costs again are relatively stable, even though there is now the full-time position for the operator that was open has been filled this current fiscal year. So we will see those costs. However, that allows us to reduce cost on temps. We're also seeing further decreases here on the operation expenses. You see that our overall operating expenses last year with $2.2 million were cut very significantly down to $1.89 million. So that results now in significant higher net cash flow from the operations that can be utilized for capital improvements or financing. So we're going to continue here. You see on the water side, the majority of the financing expenses are GO bond cost. And so that is here shown as income, the $1.15 million. So that is the receipts that we're getting through the property tax roll. And here you see now the water system reliability charge, the addition of the $1 million, that's the collection of the newly introduced water system reliability charge. So we are seeing now on this revenue level here, an additional $2.1 million in income. Our capital improvement program is roughly $1 million, expected to be around $1 million in the next fiscal year. And I want to say that that is very close to the minimum amount that we need on the water side. Unlike on the sewer side, it's a much higher need for to repair failed structures. Water system is pressurized, unlike a sewer system. So there's often a more reactive spending of the money, unfortunately. So going down, we have the same assumption on the water side, are hoping that construction and connection fee income isn't dropping down so significantly. It's a reduction that we expect, and it is reflected here. But I think this is still a very optimistic view. Here we go to our financing expenses, and you see here on the long-term debt, that now includes actually the GO bond assessments from up there. So you see that money being now paid out again. And so all in all, you see that we are now able to actually produce a slight positive cash flow with this budget of $76,000. I'm hoping that is true, and hopefully we will be able to utilize this money in a subsequent fiscal year for capital improvements. Ultimately, this money is going to our water reserves that desperately need little cash. With that, again, also we have on the water side our water engineer here as well to talk about the capital improvement program on the water side on what we hope to implement. With that, I would like to hand it over to Peter Medina, our accountant, who was instrumental in putting this budget together since some years. He's really been doing a great job helping us out, not only monitoring the numbers throughout the year, but also putting this budget together. So Peter, if you can maybe fill in the gaps that I left, that would be great.
There aren't going to be very many gaps to fill in. I can add some color commentary. I have a lot in terms of just kind of where we've been over the past 5 to 7 years of me being there. But before I begin that, I just want to say thank you to the staff and the board, especially the finance committee, and really especially the staff. This was a very difficult process. We were going along relatively smoothly in December, January, February, when we presented kind of the preliminary portions of the budget, kind of being the fiscal year end budget to actual, the mid-year budget to actual. We were looking pretty good in terms of, what we were budgeting for fiscal year 1920 for a number of the expenses which Clemens had discussed kind of weren't coming to fruition. We had professional services budgeted at $375,000, and when the bills were coming in for the year, they just weren't coming out to be that. So we were seeing we were anticipating some money falling to the bottom line by the time the fiscal year ended. That was the case on the sewer side as well, mainly in the area of both professional services as well as the CIP program, where we had anticipated over $1.8 million. Currently, we're less than $200,000. So I said, just we were looking pretty good, and then obvious things happened, and now here we are. All of that to be said that for the longest time, I went back today and I pulled up the last 8 years of audits. And looking at the operational expenses or the operational net income for the water fund, and it's never been positive. It's always been a matter of once the depreciation figure gets brought in, it brings the entire the fund to a negative, which, as we've talked about in the past for many years, that that is a funding of our infrastructure that really hasn't been done for a number of years. And just a little bit more color here. The last year for the water side, we've spent over $1 million on CIP was in fiscal year 15-16. This was our Alta Vista year. That year we had budgeted $1.7 million. We actually spent $1.58 million. In subsequent years, being 16, 17, 17, 18, 18, 19, the budget was $620,000, actual $734. 17-18 budget $714,000, actual $235,000. 18-19 budgeted $481,000, actual $482,000. Which now you look at our budget for the next 5 years, and we see $2 million plus across the board. It kind of goes to show you that this is kind of the balancing act that we go through every year with the finance committee as well as our engineers to have the discussion of, okay, what are we going to have? What's available to us in terms of operations? That's really been our discussion. What can operations do for us? And when we budget for a water revenue, which according to our water rate study that took place in 15-16, we are budgeting water revenues at the level of 15-16 at $27,000 more than in fiscal year 15-16 budget. And we're still budgeting them now for fiscal year 2021. A lot of these assumptions just have not turned out. Our assumption of 10 connections per year for both sewer and water has not panned out. And because of that, the rate income that we're expected to bring in has been significantly less than what we had anticipated a number of years ago. So those are kind of the smaller points that I wanted to bring up. I'm able to answer any questions that you guys I hope to answer any questions that you guys may have. I have my whole array of tools in front of me. So that's all I have. Thanks.
Thank you, Peter. I think I want to just briefly take a quick look actually at the water and sewer CIPs and ask our engineers to briefly talk about them. I'm going to start with the sewer CIP, and we have an overview, 5-year overview, but we have more detailed information. Excuse me, more detailed information below in the packet for anyone. But we're going to look at the overview picture here, and I'm going to hand this over to Pippin briefly. I'm not quite sure how much you have to go into the individual line items, Pippin, but maybe you can talk about the, I think the $1.2 million project is really the main driver of the cost on the sewer side right now, and is the reason why we're going to dip $1 million into reserve. Pippin, if you can talk a bit about the CIP.
Thank you, Clemens, and the board for having me here tonight to share. Similar to supporting the comments that Peter made, we each year try to set goals. We have a number of factors that goes into the goals. Each of these line items that Clemens has here in the summary. We try our best to plan for and keep up with maintenance items with SAM, which tries to stay ahead of reactionary issues, meaning making repairs prior to things springing a leak, for example, trying to keep up on those items. So that's what a lot of these smaller items are here in the budget. This larger item, medium and high priority sewers, listed at 580,000. We have over some time now, a number of years, been working with the board and finance committee and Peter and Clemens here all together, trying to balance this idea of, as Peter mentioned, the depreciation. What we need to be planning to put into our system consistently. The regulators are always asking, what have we fixed? How are we reducing sewer spills? How are we keeping the rainwater out of the system? So each year we budget for some kind of neighborhood repairs. That's our consistent reoccurring project. We try to keep up with the system and respond to SAM concerns for what they find during their maintenance. But in addition to that annual stuff, periodically we have to invest in much more expensive projects. As was mentioned earlier tonight, we have over a dozen large pump stations. Each one of those pump stations, because they're a large infrastructure item, you can do little maintenance items, but when you have to really rehabilitate them, it's a chunk of money. You have to save up for that, or you have to take a bond or something, because they can be millions of dollars for the bigger ones. This project here is a multi-phase project that we identified as early as 2012, and it's been some years in saving. The district's been putting money in reserves, and as Clement mentioned, the first part of this project is was to rehabilitate the trunk sewer. This is the largest pipe that carries the sewer north-south from Canoff Pump Station, 7th Street, all the way down through central Montara to the SAM-owned Montara Pump Station. And quite a number of years ago, the part near the pump station was fixed. And so working upstream, the next phase, which on this project out on the highway, we're calling it phase 1, which we've completed now, crossed underneath the highway. And then phase 2 will be a new pipeline that extends from 16th Street up to 14th Street. But anyone who's familiar with the area can recognize the high traffic, the very narrow street. The highway has almost no shoulder. And so much of that work is going to have to be done at night. And we've have to work very closely with Caltrans. They're very careful on their permits. They have a lot of requirements. And They've asked, even though we had an approval last year for that work, they've asked to reconsider that approval. And so we have to submit that permit again now once this budget's approved. And because of the night work and the large pipe diameter, we're expecting this project to cost somewhere in the neighborhood of $1 million to $1.25 million.
Thank you, Pippin. I'm gonna pull up the water side and ask our sewer engineer, Tanya Yurovsky, to comment. Before I do that, I wanna just point out that once again, that unfortunately in the water side, the situation is a bit more reactive than on the sewer side. We have this current fiscal year, we had planned expenditures of $500,000 on the capital side. We already have spent $800,000, and that is due to the implementation of a new treatment plant that was essentially brought to us through the regulators, a requirement that was brought to the regulators that was had to be implemented this fiscal year. That's one example of you know, how this money was spent and why we actually spent more than planned this current fiscal year. Tanya, if you can talk just briefly about, you know, what we're doing next year, and it's not going to be much because there's not much money.
Thank you, Clemens. Madam President, members of the board, this is your water CIP, and as we have done since 2011, it's consists of two parts. One is being paid by existing customers, and one is the other part being paid by the new customers, provided they actually come in. As you heard, the accountant mention and the general manager discussed that the number of connections that we had anticipated has not panned out yet. So those funding predictions have been reduced in the budget. However, we still need the projects done, and mostly we're talking about the distribution system, which is a pipe network that delivers water to your homes. And those pipes, the district has been consistently replacing them since 2003, since the district became the water district, owning the water system. However, there's still quite a few miles of pipes that we need to replace. You've heard that last Thursday. We have discussed to some extent, and we are planning replacement of only the project, the mains that are in dire need, meaning they're leaking and or at a very grave danger of starting to leak or break. And we're also taking advantage. We have done that this year and hoping again to combine projects and do something in sync with sewer so that we can take advantage of permitting in trenches and so on and so forth to minimize cost. The district does need to replace at least one generator this fiscal year, and the district is still funding the water conservation program. This is worth noting, even though it's a small item, but I have heard a lot of times people will say, well, you should operate like a business. You should operate like a business. But this is not a business. It's a water purveyor. And what business would pay people to conserve the product and buy less? This is what the district is doing. The district is paying people, you, the public, to buy more efficient washing machines and toilets and other devices to make sure you are able to conserve water, which actually hurts the revenues. So it's a kind of a double-edged sword, but we're still all into conservation and protecting natural resources. So the budget is modest, 1.1 million, the proposal, and we're going to spend it mostly on, there's one generator, maybe two if we can squeeze it, and the main replacement. That's it.
Thank you, Tanya.
Mhm.
With that, I think I'm gonna ask to hand it back to the board. We conclude the staff presentations. Of course, we're available for questions.
Thank you. Let's start with, I'm looking for hands up in the audience. I don't see any. I hope I'm not missing any. I have been known to. So Clemens, if you would please double check that.
I do not see any hands up, Catherine.
Okay. In that case, we will close the public hearing on this. I'm still looking, giving people a
It's
last
not
second.
public. It's not a public hearing.
No, it's not, but the public comment, sorry.
Yeah.
Okay, seeing none, let's bring it back to the board. And let's start with questions and comments from the board. Jim, would you like to start?
I have no comments. Thank you. Thank you, Alex, Clemens, Tanya, and Pippin for all the work you've done.
Peter?
I want to thank everybody who has worked so diligently on the budget, including the showing very clearly the improvements that we have to make. And I have no further comment.
Okay, thank you. And I want to thank the Finance Committee as well as staff for your diligence and hard work on this budget. You've been meeting with the public and inviting people to the meetings and have really put the magnifying glass to it. And the district is certainly reliant on what you've done, everyone. And I think we're doing well for that. Let me apologize for my little dog in the background. Oops, sorry. Let's move on to Scott then.
I'd just like to highlight, I know that the Finance Committee took an extra round looking for cuts, but I think this, while we have this in front of us, it's a really good time to note that if you go to, what's this, page 3 or 4 of the staff report, which gives the green and the blue summaries of the two budgets, if looking across the expense columns of both the sewer and the water, there are over in the right hand column, it's the variance, and everything in parentheses is money that was in the budget last year that we are not putting in the budget this year. So individual items were called out as we went through, but if we step back and take a look at it, I think one of the reasons that it was hard to find anything more in the final pass was we've already taken some rather substantial chunks. If you could show the water side of this, especially, there are very significant reductions, and each one of those, I mean, in prior years, we've gone into considerably more detail with, the board and the staff talking about individually what's in one of these line items. But this is a lot of money to cut from a budget. This is a lot of money to cut from a budget. And so when you hear Clemens and Tanya especially expressing concern about how lean we're running this year, this is not just not doing projects that we have on the books that we need to do, but we've also cut into what we ordinarily spend on operations. And we can get away with that in the short term, perhaps, but long term, running this lean leaves us in a really tough spot. And what usually fills that gap is the people that we have on staff working that much harder and paying that much more attention. And we're asking them to pick up a lot of slack here. And so I hope the community has an opportunity now to see that even though we've got a very small staff to serve Montara and Moss Beach across its entire, all the different neighborhoods and all the different facilities that we have, this is asking a lot. Most people don't know what somebody on our water crew does day to day, but every single day, this team is out checking all of the pieces of equipment and doing maintenance and doing things for things that break, or delivering possible leak notices to people where their meter readings looked a little high, or investigating things that either someone in the public has raised a concern about, or maybe it's something the staff has been trying to investigate. I mean, there's all sorts of things that these folks are doing, as well as maintaining their certifications and doing training and all the other things that it takes for staff to be staff. So I want to express my gratitude, and I hope that with some of what we see here, that members of the public have a little better insight into just how hard staff and our consultants are working to really put the screws to this budget. Thank you, Catherine.
You're welcome. I have a couple comments I want to make, and it's about budgets in general for agencies. The more our agency grows, our population and number of connections grow, and the more water that's sold, the more we can cover these costs. Because growth, particularly infill growth, adds more need for gallonage, but it doesn't necessarily add more need for newer, faster pumps or storage. And so if we've got more people, more residences to share those costs, people see a decrease in the rate of acceleration of costs just from the economy as a whole. So that's something to keep in mind, is if we still had only, when I moved here, 1,500 houses, maybe 2,000. Is it that many? No. Our water rates would be even higher. So not all development is bad as long as it fits in. In the 70s, Prop 13 was passed, and one of the results of Prop 13 was that any cities or special districts that were created didn't get much in the way, if any, property tax revenues. So our district gets $550,000 in property taxes, and it's classified as an enterprise district. According to the legislature and the state and LAFCO, we are supposed to support ourselves entirely from our fees and rates. We're lucky there have been efforts at the state level to take property tax revenues away from special districts. So our total property tax income is less than 7% of our entire budget. Last week's meeting, somebody mentioned the fire district. 98% of their budget comes from property taxes. So there's a big difference and it's a guaranteed. Ours is not, because of the ERAF. And I will also say that prior to this district taking over the water district, we had lots of apparent springs throughout Montara mostly close to the roads. Turns out they were leaky pipes. And one of the things that this district has done, and done very well, is to audit the pipes and pumps and see where the leaks are and fix them by prioritizing them. That also reduces your rates and your costs, because you have to pay for the leaky water. It's in your bill because we have to pump it up. We have to distribute it. We use all the power and energy and pipes to distribute it, only to have it go into the ground. So it's very important to keep these things up to date and not leaking, because for every fix we make long-term savings. And my guess is, I haven't talked to an engineer, but I'm sure if we looked at it, that the cost of the fix over the long run is much less than the loss of money from a leaking pipe. And frankly, that's true in your house. And if you have a little drippy toilet or faucet, please take care of it. Those get very expensive very fast. But the staff has done an excellent job on cutting our costs. But I will tell you, these things, the fixes are not going to be any less needed in the future. They will have to be done. They will have to be done when wages are higher, materials are higher, costs are higher, insurance is higher. So putting off a project may save a little bit in the short run, but in the long run, we're going to have to be paying more for it. This district is very good staff, engineers, and accounting staff at evaluating what needs to be done. I think if they all had their druthers, it would all be done yesterday, and we wouldn't need to do this. But as we all know, things break. So I want to give my deepest thanks to the public who has followed us through this. Hopefully we've been able to help you understand more of what is in your district to make it run. And I also want to thank all of our crew, from the very most part-time all the way up through Clemens, because you guys all do an excellent job. And we have a very good water district. We said, when I was campaigning for the bond, I said we didn't want a fancy Maserati kind of water district, and we didn't want a broken down old horse of a water district like we were acquiring, but we wanted to have a good, smooth running, middle of the cost district, and we have done that. And I'm very proud of what this community has done, the community of the district and the people who live here, and all of the people who come in as consultants, and even the people who do repair. It's very good. So I will end with that and ask for a motion, review and possible action concerning approval of MWSD water and sewer budgets and capital improvement programs, approving the resolution next in order. And we also have, was the other one supposed to come first?
So there's a resolution that we're asking to adopt, and we're also asking to authorize a 1.1% living increase for the non-exempt.
Right. And was that first? Did that need to come first? I apologize.
Yes.
Okay, let's have a motion then to authorize.
I move to authorize 1.11% cost of living increase for all non-exempt employees.
Thank you, Scott. And who's the second?
I second the motion.
Jim, thank you. Roll call vote, please.
Director Boyd,
Aye.
Director Decker,
Aye.
Director Harvey,
Aye.
Director Slater Carter.
Yes. Now we will move on to approving the resolution next in
I'm-
order.
I move resolution of the Montara Water and Sanitary District approving budget for the fiscal year 2020-2021 as presented.
Okay,
I
second. Thank you, Peter. Roll call vote, please.
Okay, Director Boyd,
Aye.
Director Decker,
Aye.
Director Harvey,
Aye.
Director Slater Carter.
Yes. That motion carries 4-0 with Rick Lohman absent. We're moving on to the reports, and I don't do a very good job of reporting on the Mid-Coast Community Council, but I know a lot has been happening. Barbara, would you be willing to do a report on the happenings at the council? That will be the second report. The first report is Sewer Authority Mid-Coast meetings. And I think everybody on this conference call has heard our comments. I am very, very concerned with what's going on because it appears that a project that is of great importance to preventing future spills, particularly at Surfers Beach, and to giving more flexible operations ability to the sewer plant will be opposed by Half Moon Bay. We will be hearing that at our first meeting in, what is it, July 13th? I've forgotten the date already. It is a live meeting, so you can watch it broadcast. You can also sign in to participate on Zoom. Please do so. The sign-in is on our agenda. And with that, I will move on and ask Barbara, I see you unmuted. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Catherine. Hi, I'm Barbara Mathewson. I'm a member of the Mid-Coast Community Council, and I'd be happy to tell you what we've been up to lately. Basically, just connect the coast side. The county put on a virtual meeting 2 weeks ago, I believe, on a Saturday. It was not very well attended by the community, and the meeting did not go terribly well. So we're pushing on. There'll be another virtual meeting on Monday at 6:30, which will focus on the Montara Moss Beach section of Connect the Coast Side. The other project we've been focusing on is Cypress Point in Moss Beach. And today it went before the Planning Commission, and they did vote to change the LCP. So we will continue to meet about Cypress Point's going to take a while. So those are the two things we've really been having to deal with. And that's it. Thank you.
And thank you for all the hard work that the Mid-Coast Community Council does.
Thank you.
You guys are awesome. Moving right along, the next two reports, Rick Lohman is not here to report on them. Attorney's report.
No report. Thank you, Madam President.
Director's reports. Hearing none. General Manager's report.
No report at this time.
Okay, and it was attached to our last staff report.
Catherine, we may have missed a comment from Sid on the last item on the agenda.
I may have. I would just asked her if I could try and answer it now. It certainly won't change the vote, but she can certainly make a statement.
It wasn't a statement, it was the question. Is there a policy for MWSD on either the sewer or the water side to maintain a certain level of reserves? I noticed we kind of dipped below, but is there a future going forward policy to build those up and not dip below?
Yes.
How much? Oh, go ahead.
The policy is included in the packet. It's also available on the website under Finances, Reserve Policy. You can look it up. It is actually sliding. So depends on how our CIP is structured. So it changes every year. What we have a minimums level and a maximum level set. And we are on the sewer side, we're still okay right now. On the water side, we are far below any requirement that we set ourselves.
So it's not really a requirement if you've just allowed it to be kind of elastic like that. I was
Sid,
just concerned because I noticed we
It's
really
it's
got
a-
low.
Okay,
Actually, if I could say something, Sid,
thank
that's
you.
that's an interesting way to look at it, but it's not how we arrived at the policy. The policy is set to ensure that we have reserves for the anticipated projects that are coming up in the coming years. So it's a pre-funding mechanism. It's saving for what we know is coming. We have other reserve policy elements that have to do with making sure that we have enough money for operating expense month to month. And so we need some amount of time should something happen to be able to continue operations. So these are not arbitrary policies. These are actually very carefully considered policies. And the flexibility has to do directly with what we know about need, and also informed by thinking through the risk of catastrophic events occurring, needing repairs on equipment. So if you go back and look at the legislative history of how we arrived at the policy may be fairly short and sweet, but a lot went into thinking it through. Far more than is reflected, say, for example, in the SAM reserve policy.
And then why did the board decide to put the new water reliability charge on the property tax bills instead of billing it out monthly or bi-monthly, since it's water related?
Said we actually addressed that several times in several previous meetings, and the answer is still that the capital infrastructure that it is designated to serve is something that's related to having everything available to the properties ongoing. It is not tied to consumption of water. It's not tied to the production of water. It's tied to having the system intact, in place, and operational on any given day that people need it.
Thank you. Let's, future agendas are on our website. They are the general obligation bond refinancing, MWSD defined benefit plan actuarial evaluation, strategic community planning workshop, sewer capital improvement project, public bid initiation, and review of MWSD public outreach program. If other folks on the board or in the community want to talk to Clemens about future agenda items, please do so. Now we're going to recess and then convene in closed session. So everybody who is not appropriately in closed session, please sign off.
Thank you all for being here.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Tracy. Thank you, Pippin.
you.
Thank you, Tanya. Thank you,